Hi, this is Cheryl Deemer, and welcome to my stamping classroom. Today we're going to be making this beautiful card made out of designer series paper strips, and which has been embossed with a 3D embossing folder. This is a quick and easy card and fun to make, and it's sure to cheer up anybody with the bright colors and the fun sentiments. So let's get started. The supplies you'll need to make this card is the Ridiculously Awesome stamp set. I used You Are My Sunshine, but you could use any large sentiment. I'm also going to be using the Dainty Diamonds 3D embossing folder, and on this sample that I have here, I used the hammered metal, but I thought I'd change things up for this card. As far as dies are concerned, you will need the Stitch So Sweetly dies, and it's the third largest, third from the smallest. And then also I used the Pets dies, and what I used was the little the little paw prints, because the middle of the paw actually makes the sweetest little hearts. So, as far as other items, you will need the Ornate Garden Ribbon Combo Pack, because that has the Calypso Coral ribbon in it. And then I also used the Playing with Patterns Designer Series paper, and these are cut at 1/2 inch by 6 inches. And I used a variety of pieces of paper. What I would recommend is that you use the paper from the same paper pack, but it doesn't matter which paper pack you use. Now, I used about 4 or 5 different sheets of paper, and this is what I used, and I picked them because of the pretty colors that were in them. And then also, please remember that there are backs to our designer series paper, so you've got double. You'll need about 12 strips to make this card. You will also need thick Whisper White, and this is cut at 11 by 4 1/4 and scored at 5 1/2. You will also need a Night of Navy piece of cardstock that is 4 by 5 1/4, and you'll need a Whisper White, again, which is cut at 4 by 5 1/4. And this will be cut down eventually to the proper size. And then you'll need a scrap that's about 2 1/2 by 4 1/2, and this is for our sentiment. So let's get stamping. Let's stamp the sentiment first. I've mounted my stamp on a clear block, and I'm using Night of Navy ink. And again, because this is such a large stamp, I'm laying it on its back, and I'm going to pat it with the ink pad. And just center that and give it a good push. Okay, now you may notice that I didn't quite get all the ink where I wanted it. Here's a little hint. Take a Stamping Right marker. Now this isn't the alcohol marker, this is the regular markers. And I'm using the bullet end, and you just dot where it needs to be done, and just use little dots and fill it in so that it looks natural. Okay, I'll be cutting that out with the Stitch So Sweetly rectangle, but I will be doing that a little bit later, so let's set that to the side. Okay, next I'll be stamping, well, this is the base of the card, and this is where we're going to put our designer series paper strips on. So first I'm using a silicone mat so I don't get my work surface messed up, and I'm putting tape on all the edges right up to the very edge, and then fill it in the middle. Okay, so now I'm going to start with the strips. And it doesn't really matter which strip you start with, but you know, just kind of sort through your strips, and remember that there's 2 sides. So just kind of sort through them and kind of figure out what you like and what you don't like, and which ones will be going together. So I'm going to start with, I kind of like to start with a bold one. So I'm going to start with this this solid color strip, and we're going to go straight in the middle at an angle, and make sure it's a pretty good angle. You don't want it up and down. Then I'm going to take another strip and I'm going to place it right next to it. And this is why you need the 6-inch strips, so that it'll cover the entire card. Now, my next strip that I take, which is a completely different one, I'm going to go in the opposite direction. I'm going to go perpendicular to the two that we put down. And normally I put 2 to 3 strips down before I change directions. So I will put another one next to the Calypso Coral and press that down. And let's see, this one, oops, we need a flat edge, so I'm going to do 3 on this one. And now I'm going to change directions again. I'm going to go up and down, choosing a purple posy, and it doesn't really matter what you really pick. This is going to turn out beautiful no matter how you do it. So what I'm going to be doing is filling in the strips for the first half of the card. Just do 1/2 at a time. So I will continue to keep adding the strips until half of the card is filled up. This is really a good project to use up all your little scraps of designer series paper. And each time you make one of these cards, it looks different, but it still looks great. I just love making this card. Okay, we're just about done. There's just a little bit there, but you can put something there if you want to. If you don't, you don't have to, because we will be trimming this card down anyway. Okay, now that half of it's filled up with designer series paper, I'm going to take my long scissors, flip it over, and trim right next to the card base. And see, now I have all these shorter strips, little pieces, which I can use on the other side. Okay, so now I'm going to start filling up the other side. So again, I'm just randomly picking up pieces, just kind of figuring out how I want it to look. Let's see, let's put it right here. Okay, and then I just continue to fill in the other half of the card. You just put a couple of strips down and then you change direction. You can do it however you want. There is no right or wrong in making this card, and that's what makes it so much fun. And another thing too is that you don't push them down too hard, so you can adjust the stripes if you don't get them quite straight the first time you put them down. Okay, that half is filled up. And once again, I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to trim. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to do is cut this down. And I'm going to cut this down to 3 3/4 by, let's see, 4 3/4. 3.5 by 4 3/4. So I'm taking about a 1/2 inch off of each side, off of one side. So I'm taking a 1/2 inch off the short side and a 1/2 inch off the long side. And the reason I'm doing this is that I want a nice size border around this background. So there, we've got those two strips, which we will be using later. Okay, see, look, it looks beautiful already. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is put this through the embossing folder, and this is the Dainty Diamond 3D folder, and as you can see, it's thick. So the sandwich for this, for your big shot, would be this standard platform and this blue plate. Now, Stampin' Up! Is coming out with a new die cutting machine, which is similar to this, but it's not quite the same. Okay, so I'm going to go to the big shot and emboss that. And here it is when I come back. And see how it unifies everything by just embossing it? And it also gives it a nice texture. Okay, so I've cut out the sentiment, I've made the little bow, and we are ready to assemble our card. So I'm bringing out the card base and the Knight of Navy. I'm going to attach the striped background to the Knight of Navy, and then eventually the Knight of Navy will go to the white base card. But first of all, I want to put the little heart on the sunshine, and like I said before, I use this die because the pads of the little dog feet are tiny, tiny hearts, and they're just precious. There's 3 sizes. There's a large, a medium, and a small. And I'm going to use the medium one on this one, and I'm going to put the heart on the eye of the sunshine. Now let me show you a little trick here. I'm going to take some Tombow glue and my silicone mat and spread out a little bit of, just a drop of glue. I'm going to use the Take Your Pick tool. One end is kind of gummy, and I am going to pick that heart up, the medium-sized heart, and I'm just going to dip it in the glue there. And then I'm going to add it on to my sentiment. And because it's Tombow glue, it's liquid, you've got a few seconds before it hardens or sticks. So you can just kind of manipulate your object around until you get it just where you want it. Okay, so we are done with those little hearts. Okay, so let's continue to assemble this card. I'm going to use my liquid Tombow all-purpose glue, and I'm going to put this on the back just because of the speed. It's a little faster, and I'm going to center that on the Knight of Navy. You notice there's a nice pretty border around it, which really makes the colors in this pattern paper pop. Next, I'm going to be adding this to our thick Whisper White card base. Again, I'm using Tombow glue. Now for the sentiment, I'm going to use dimensionals to pop those up. Now, when I get to the end of my dimensionals, I use the edges to use on my sentiments because they're long, and I'm using every bit of the dimensionals that are on the page. And nobody sees the back of it, so it can look pretty gnarly, and nobody's ever going to notice. But this gives a good support to the sentiment. And I'm going to place that on the front of the card, kind of the lower right hand corner. And then I'm going to use a glue dot to adhere the ribbon, the little bow. Again, I put the glue dot where I want the ribbon, and I press it on there. Okay, now I'm going to finish it off with these Playing with Patterns resin dots. On the other card I used rhinestones, but I thought this would be fun because the colors match so nicely here. So I will just sprinkle 3 of those on this card. And then as a final touch, I'm going to use my Wink of Stella, and I'm going to color the little heart so that it's nice and shiny. And there you have it. A beautiful, happy, cheerful looking card that anybody would be happy to receive.